How's it everyone, Grant here, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to my review of the Nokia 8. And so HMD Global has done a good job of bringing back a series of Nokia branded phones here, and the Nokia 8 is their current flagship. Even though there are rumors of the Nokia 9 floating around there, the Nokia 8 right here is still the current flagship device. And let's just kind of get the price out of the way. It's not available here in the United States. I had to pick this up while on vacation in Australia, where they had it for sale for $899 Australian, which is just over $700 here in the US. And for me personally, I don't think it's worth $700 or anywhere near in that price range, at least in the US. I think it's rumored to be coming here to the US, maybe towards the end of October. I'm not really sure, but if you do get your hands on this, I don't think you should be paying anything more than $500. And I think as I go through the review, you'll probably hear and understand kind of why I'm saying that. But with price out of the way, let's kind of actually get into the device itself. And we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's kind of just get into it with the kind of hardware design here. And if you look at it here, you can see it's got this all black face here, which is kind of nice. And the first thing that's going to hit you here in 2017 are the top and bottom bezels here. Fairly minimal side bezel, but I think a lot of people will probably be put off with the large top and bottom bezel here. They're expecting probably more bezel-less design in their flagships here in 2017. I can totally understand that. It doesn't really bother me, but I can understand why people might be expecting more of a bezel-less design. So just something to note there. But I do like that it's a black face. It kind of minimizes the size of the bezel. It doesn't draw your attention there quite as much. And at the top there you can see the 13 megapixel front facing camera, the earpiece there, and the Nokia branding here, which might be hard to see in some of this light. Nokia branding right there, the fingerprint scanner, and the backlit bottom capacitive buttons. On the back is the star of the show here, this all unibody aluminum build here. It's a very nice and sturdy build. No creaking or anything going on here. This is the steel color. It comes in a few other colors. I think a couple different blue colors, one kind of glossy, one kind of matte, and another copper color. I like this steel color here. In different kind of lightings, it looks a little copperish. It looks steel, obviously, a little bit titanium. So definitely looks like a metal color phone. So I definitely like that. Nokia branding here, and the classic Nokia styling ovalish camera housing the dual 13 megapixel cameras, and the Zeiss branded optics, if you can see there, Zeiss branded, and the dual tone LED flash. And the main camera here does have OIS built into it. They have their secondary camera, which is a monochrome sensor. So they've implemented a monochrome sensor in the secondary camera, much like Huawei phones have, and we'll get more into that when we get into the camera portion here. You can see a microphone there. On the bottom, you're going to see the Type-C port with another primary microphone, as well as the speaker grills there. On the right-hand side, you've got your power button and your volume rockers, and on the top, you do have a headphone jack. And yes, this does have a headphone jack, so if you're afraid that they ditched the headphone jack, they did not. And I'll say the one thing that I probably don't like about the design is probably the antenna bands. You can kind of see here, it's these plastic top and bottom rails there. Just because of the steel color, I think they've gone to this kind of lighter, kind of plasticky color, and it really stands out. And I think it kind of ruins the metal design there, but at least it's on the top and the bottom and not kind of banded lines on the back. So at least when you're looking at it straight on here, it looks pretty clean. That's probably the only thing I don't like about design. It's a very hefty design because of this metal, so it's about 160 grams, I think. And to put that in perspective, it's going to be heavier than a Galaxy S8, heavier than an iPhone 7, iPhone 8, Google Pixel. So comparable flagships of this size, it's going to be heavier, have a much more substantial in-hand feel because of this metal unibody design. And that's something that I really like. My personal preference is towards these kind of metal phones because of just the look. I don't like, it doesn't pick up as much fingerprints as well as glass, and it just has a nice heftier feel in the hand because of that, just like this Nokia 8 here. So as far as design goes, I personally like it. I like these metal phones, and those bezels don't really bother me too much. Shout out to Reggie U there. If you don't know Reggie, go check out his channel, Reggie U. He puts out some great camera reviews there. And let's get over some connectivity real quick, because I did buy this internationally. And so if you do import it, it does support US GSM bands. The main bands 2 and 4, I believe it has band 5 as well. It does not have the more deep penetrating bands of 12 and 17 for T-Mobile and AT&T respectively. But because it does have bands 2 and 4, you are going to get LTE here. So if you can see here, I am on T-Mobile. I've got a T-Mobile SIM in here. And if I actually turn off the Wi-Fi, you'll see here I am connected on LTE, 4G LTE. all connected up, you're going to get that bands 2 and 4. If you need deep building penetration because you're in a place that has some rough signal, or for me, like my work building, if I go towards the middle of buildings, I lose signal unless I have band 12. Even then, it's a faint signal. When I take this into work, I go into those areas, I get no signal. So if you're one of those folks where you need that deep penetrating band 12 or 17 on T-Mobile or AT&T or the MVNOs respectively, just know it doesn't have that. And of course, if you're on a CDMA network here in the US like Verizon or Sprint, need not apply. This is not going to work for you. So just a quick PSA there on connectivity. And then moving on to the fingerprint scanner, if we power it on, you can see there, the fingerprint scanner, I'll say I'm a little bit disappointed in for a flagship phone. It's not really that fast, so if you can see there, it's okay, it's fast enough, but it doesn't look too bad, but between the vibration and it coming on like you saw there, it's a little bit of a delay, and more of a delay than it needs to be in a flagship phone, I think, so it's nowhere near the speed of what you're going to get on a OnePlus device or a Huawei device, and it feels more like a mid-range responsiveness as far as fingerprint scanners go, but I will say it is very accurate, and I haven't really had it fail me. So every time it turns on like that, and if you keep turning it off and on, it's going to become quicker. But most of us will leave it off, right? And you'll come back and you'll hit the fingerprint scanner and try to get into your phone. You're going to notice a little bit of a delay, more than you're accustomed to if you're coming from some of the other flagship phones like a OnePlus, maybe some of the Huawei flagships, or even a Galaxy S8, S8 Plus, and a Note 8. It's a little bit slower. I feel like it's more like mid-range responsiveness. So that's one thing I don't like about the fingerprint scanner there. But it does have those backlit capacitive buttons, which I do like, as you can see there, because that means no on-screen buttons, and you really maximize the display here. 5.3 inches across diagonally. It's a Quad HD 2K 1440p LCD display. It is an IPS display, so you can see it's got some pretty true-to-life colors, some really nice viewing angles. Viewing angles are not a problem here. And just as a quick anecdote, on vacation I handed this to my sister just to use, not just to get feedback. She just wanted to check out some upcoming places that we're going to, map things out, etc. And the first thing she told me when she took a look at this was that it has a really nice and bright display. And she uses a Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge Plus, so she's got a Super AMOLED display on her Samsung phone, and she thought this was a really bright and really nice and clear looking display. And that's completely unprompted. She's not a tech enthusiast into tech like probably a lot of us are, just a normal person, and that was just an unprompted comment. So kind of take that for what you will. But for me personally, yes, it's an LCD display, but it's an IPS display. It looks really nice. It gets very, very bright. So if we kind of crank that up there, you can see it does get very bright. Sunlight visibility is not a problem with this. And I can even go in here into display. You take off adaptive brightness and keep it cranked up so you can kind of see what it looks like at max brightness there. It is definitely bright. Sunlight visibility, like I said, is not going to be a problem here. Probably one of the better LCD panels that I've seen on a phone. So very nice display here on the Nokia 8. Another thing you're going to notice here with the screen on is that it's running stock Android. And when I mean stock Android, it is bare bones stock Android, very much a Pixel-like experience. You can see here pretty much the Pixel launcher itself here. And out of the box, this was zero bloatware. It only had Google apps, nothing else. The only custom app is the Nokia camera app here, and we'll get more into that when we get to the camera. You even have the Google Now if you swipe in from the left there. So very much a stock Android Pixel-like software experience. I'm going to say not as smooth as a Pixel because to me, for whatever reason, no phone is as smooth as a Pixel, regardless if it's running stock Android or not. But that's not to say that this is not smooth or not fast. There's just a responsiveness and a feel that you have to have when you use a Pixel, and this doesn't quite have that, but it's definitely fast, definitely fast. If you look at all this stuff, I can launch a few apps here like Twitter, launch Instagram, maybe YouTube. You can see it all launches fairly quickly, Telegram. And we can go through some of our recent apps. You can see it's very smooth and it's scrolling. Multitasking is very fast and responsive. So no problems here on day-to-day usage as far as performance because it is stock Android. It does have the Snapdragon 835, 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of onboard storage, and all that combined with that stock Android really makes this thing perform very, very well. If we go into here, you can see the notification shade, obviously stock Android, as well as the settings. If I go into About Phone, out of the box, it comes running Android 7.1.1. It had the July security patch. As you can see here, I'm running the September security patch. It is the first week in October here, so hopefully I get the October security update coming soon. But out of the box, it was running the July security patch, and I got 2 immediate updates to get me to the September security patch. So I'm really hoping for that continued timely responsiveness that Nokia has pretty much been promising with this phone here running stock Android. But some of the cons around running stock Android that people have is that it's not going to be feature rich. You're not going to have a lot of that third-party add-on features that some people really, really like. It's going to be fairly bare bones. There are a few things that it does have, though. If you go into display, you're going to notice here that it has double tap to wake the screen. So when it's off, we can go ahead and double tap the screen to wake it. And it also has this glance feature here, so that's pretty much their always on display. If you go into that, you can customize a little bit what gets shown on that display. So when I turn it off, that's when you're going to see here that always on display. But because it's an LCD display, it does light up the whole screen. When it's a bit dark, you're going to see the whole screen does kind of light up. So it will time out after a while. And in the settings, you can set when you want that to time out, a minute all the way up to 20 minutes. Another thing here, you can look into the gestures that it has. So only one gesture, jump to camera. So this is basically double press the power button to launch the camera. So that is nice, a quick access to your camera there, but that's pretty much the only gesture feature that you're going to get there. And here we go, motion features. So some of the typical motion features: turn over the phone to reject the call, mute on pickup. So if it's ringing, you can pick up your phone, it'll mute it, and it'll show you kind of how to use those motions. But you've got those 2 motions there, and that's pretty much about it. And that's going to be pretty much it as far as features are concerned. And so like I was saying, the only real custom app on here is their camera app. So let's talk a little bit about the camera. So if we launch into here, this is the Nokia camera app. And I'll just start off by saying a couple things that I don't like about the Nokia camera. One, it does not have 60 frames per second for 1080p recording, which is a big bummer. I think any flagship nowadays should have 1080p 60 frames per second recording. The HTC U11 did not have it, and they recently pushed out an update to enable 60 frames per second recording. So hopefully HMD Global, you can release an update that will enable 60 frames per second recording here on your Nokia 8 flagship. That would be much appreciated. And the second thing that I don't like about the camera is the shutter lag and the slow autofocus. So when it tries to autofocus on things, depending on the lighting situations, autofocus can be slow, and subsequently shutter speed can be slow. I missed a few quick moments on my vacation because of that, so that's a little bit of a bummer with the camera. But otherwise, it does have several great features here that I'll kind of go into here. So if you look in here in the photo mode, because it does have these dual cameras, you can actually use you can actually elect how you choose to use those cameras. So you can say twin, which is using both the main and monochrome sensor at the same time. It'll combine the images into one photo to produce the best possible photo for you. You can elect to only use the primary color sensor, and you can also elect to use only the mono sensor. So if you want to take monochrome photos, this is really nice. If you're into photography, you like monochrome, you want to use a true monochrome sensor so that you don't have a lot of that kind of chroma noise that goes on when in artificial black and white photography. So a true monochrome sensor for some pretty artistic monochrome shots if you're into that. I usually just leave it on twin to use both sensors to give me the best possible picture. And you can also choose which cameras you want to use. So you can use the main camera, you can obviously use the front selfie camera, and you can elect to use both cameras. And this will give you that kind of mix shot here where you can see the main camera here and the front camera at the same time. You can snap that pic, and you can show what's in front of you and what you are pointing at with the rear camera. So that's a little bit of flexibility there. And if you go back into main settings here, you've got your timer, auto HDR, which is going to be key. Every flagship should have auto HDR, and your flash settings. Of course, here are your camera settings here. You can choose to use things like altitude compass, you can watermark it, but here are the resolution settings really, which are kind of key here. You can see on the front and rear camera, max 13 megapixels, and on the video recording from the rear, you've got 4K, 1080p, and 720p. Like I said, no 60 frames recording, which is definitely a bummer. But on the front camera, even though you do not have 60 frames per second here, which is not expected, you do have 4K, so you can shoot Ultra HD 4K footage from the front-facing camera. That is a rarity, even in flagship phones. Not all flagships have it. The Galaxy S8, S8 Plus, Note 8 only go up to 2K. So Nokia 8, you got 4K recording from that front-facing camera, which is pretty nice. And I put up a camera sample test video from my vacation videos and pictures from Australia, so you can check out what that 4K footage looks like in that video. And the other thing you noticed in the settings was live broadcast. So if I hit over to the video camera here, you'll notice you have the live option. So you can go live straight from the camera app. You don't have to use a YouTube Live app. You don't have to use Facebook Live. You can just go into your camera app and you can go live on Facebook and or YouTube straight from the camera app. So that's pretty awesome. More phones are probably implementing Facebook Live, but a lot of phones that used to have YouTube Live have taken them out, like Sony phones. Samsung used to have it up to the S7 line. So you got it here in the Nokia 8, which is pretty cool if you're a content creator or you just want to go live and show your friends and family some stuff. You can do it straight from the camera app here. And just like the still photos, you can actually elect which cameras to use, front, back, or both at the same time. So if you like to use both at the same time, that's another creative option that you can use it to capture video as well. Another cool option is audio here. So when you're capturing video, you can choose to elect surround sound, which is both all the microphones, which is on the bottom, top, and on the rear. Or you can elect to use just the front microphone. So if you're only trying to record from the front and your voice, you can elect to do that and ignore the background noise. Or you can just do the rear. So if you're maybe doing an interview with somebody and you don't want your voice or your breathing or anything to get in the way, you just want to record from the rear microphone, you can do that. So directional audio while recording video, you have those options here, which is very, very cool. And if we go back into the still photo settings, you'll notice additional modes here. So you've got your manual mode, and that's a little bit of a disappointment as well, I'll have to admit. There's not a lot of control here in the manual settings. So you can see here, it's more presets than actual sliders. So that's a little bit of a bummer here in the manual mode. It's not completely manual, not fine-tuned granular settings there. So if you're into pro modes, you're into manual modes, you're not going to get as granular settings there. But the star of the show of the still camera here is this live bokeh mode. That is their portrait mode. And this is probably the best portrait mode on any smartphone that I've used. Now, I'll caveat that by saying I have not yet used the iPhone 8 Plus, I've not used the Note 8, etc. So I've not used those phones just yet, but to me, it is better than the iPhone 7 Plus because this works in a lot more lighting situations. The iPhone 7 Plus is probably the best portrait mode camera to a lot of folks, and because it uses a telephoto lens with a very low aperture, it can't take live portrait mode shots in lower lighting situations. It just won't happen. And this Nokia 8 will. It'll handle low light situations a lot better than any other phone. It'll take the quote-unquote portrait mode, they call it live bokeh mode, and pretty much not any situation, but a lot of lighting situations that other phones would struggle in. And so I've got another video up on that dedicated just to that feature because I think it is a standout feature here on the Nokia 8. This is up to now, my go-to phone if I want to take any kind of a portrait photo, just because it's easy. I know I'm going to get the shot, and I can also adjust it after I take the shot. So go check out that video if you want to learn more about live bokeh. I think it's the best feature. I've also got camera samples up in that video as well. And you've also got other standard features like panorama mode here. And this is actually pretty good as well. I've got some panorama shots in my Australia camera test video. You can check out panorama there. It stitches the photos pretty seamlessly, so I didn't see any real stitching problems. And beauty mode, which I just don't use there. If you switch back to video, you can see some of the video settings here. I just got time lapse and slow motion. I think slow motion is probably the other downside here. Slow motion is not very slow motion. It doesn't list the frames per second that it's recording it in, so I'm not really sure. But I did take some slow motion video. I'll try to show you some here as well. And so here's some slow motion video that I took on my vacation to Australia. This is just the fireplace, obviously, and this is supposed to be slow motion. And so it may be a little slower, but it's nowhere near as slow as a lot of standard slow motion shots. So I'm not really sure what the frames per second are here, but it's definitely not slow enough to produce enough of a dramatic slow motion effect. So I think slow motion video is probably the other downside here to the Nokia 8 camera. I wouldn't really recommend using it for slow motion shots. So like I said, I do have a camera test video with a lot of still photos and video. Go check that out if you want to look at the camera quality for yourself. I think it's a very capable camera. It can definitely take some very nice photos. It struggles a little bit, I think, in low light, and it's sometimes a hit or a miss camera. It is definitely capable of getting some very, very nice shots, and I think I posted a bunch to my Instagram. Again, like I said, I posted it to that dedicated camera test video, so you can go and judge the quality for yourself there. But I think the standout feature here of this camera is that live bokeh mode. I would go to this camera for that all the time. Results come out very, very nice, and it's got that live mode and that twin camera mode to use both the front and the back camera at the same time. So those are some of the standout features to me of this particular camera here on the Nokia 8. So we can kind of talk about battery life for a little bit. So like I said, while using this on vacation, I was heavily on mobile data pretty much all day. I only got to Wi-Fi when I went back to my hotel at night. And so then I was pulling down maybe 3.5, barely 4 hours of screen on time. And that's pretty good considering I was using it very heavy. I was using it for GPS navigation, using the camera a lot, using it to look up a lot of things. So I was really pushing it heavy on mobile data. And so 3.5 to 4 hours wasn't bad. It was enough to get me through the morning and the afternoon. I just had to charge up a little bit before dinner, so that's not too bad. Once I got back from vacation, though, I went to judge it on my normal daily routine, and that's when battery life kind of settled in. I was able to get more like, I think, 5 hours, even up to maybe just over 6 hours of screen on time, depending on my usage. So that's still pretty good. I think with the Snapdragon 835, I think this has just over a 3,000 milliamp hour battery. So that's not too bad. A lot of flagships are only coming with just over about 3,000 milliamp hour batteries for some reason this year. But it does seem that that Snapdragon 835 is fairly optimized for a powerful processor. So on normal usage, like I was saying, I was getting 5 hours, sometimes 6 hours of screen on time, which is more like it. So battery life can be pretty good. It just, like I said, depends on how you use it. Those are kind of my results, just to kind of share with you there on that. And just to note a couple more things about connectivity, like I said before, if you're in the United States, not going to work on Verizon or Sprint. Will work on T-Mobile and AT&T on its main 2 and 4 bands, LTE bands, but it does not have 12 or 17, like I said, so it won't have that deep building penetration where you struggle for signal. But other things on connectivity, you can see here, it does have Wi-Fi calling, so Wi-Fi calling is supported. It does work very nicely on T-Mobile. Calls are very nice and clear on Wi-Fi calling. It also does have 4G LTE enhanced calling, so this is basically voice over LTE, and it does sound good on voice over LTE. Definitely makes a difference there. So calls are very nice and clear. Just a little bit soft. If you can see that speaker up top, it's a little bit small, and calls aren't really the loudest through there. I have to turn it up all the way to max volume to really get some clear sound out of that speaker there. But you know, a lot of phones are kind of like that today, but just kind of worth noting, it's not going to be the loudest ear speaker there. But I did just want to point out that Wi-Fi calling and voice over LTE does work, at least on T-Mobile here in the US. Also, you can see there it does support NFC, so if you want to use NFC for payments or whatever else, you've got NFC on board here as well. And other things like audio, so like headphone jack performance when you're plugging a set of headphones. There's no kind of equalizer or controls on here because it's like Android and they don't have an equalizer or sound app here, so you're just going to be stuck with whatever is onboard sound. I'm not really sure if what they're licensing off of Qualcomm for that sound, if there's kind of any internal DAC or not that they're licensing off of the Qualcomm chip. I don't really think so because audio with a headphones plugged in, even some of my top of the line headphones, audio sounds pretty good, not great. HTC 10, U Ultra, some of those other phones still probably outperform this by miles. I do think it's going to sound fine for most people. I don't think you're going to have a problem with that. It does only have a single firing bottom speaker here, and it's a pretty loud speaker, so I wouldn't be too concerned. Sound does not come out of this earpiece for dual speaker sound, unfortunately, but it is a very loud bottom firing speaker here. So let's go see if we can play some audio for you. I'll play that camera test. It's got some audio in it. Let's go back a little bit. So that's max volume there. That's pretty good out of that speaker, I think. And even with it covered up, you can kind of still hear it. Doesn't completely muffle the sound or cut it completely off. Definitely muffles it, but you can still kind of hear it. And with it off, that's pretty good. At 50% volume, not too bad. Crank it back up. So overall, not too bad of a single firing bottom speaker there. Very loud. Not going to be the greatest. You don't get that dual speaker experience, but that's kind of become commonplace now in some of these flagships where you only get that single speaker. And for a single speaker, I think it's pretty loud enough. Just definitely not going to be the greatest audio experience there. And lastly, just some miscellaneous things to cover. It's not going to have wireless charging, obviously, because of the all-metal back. And it does not carry any official IP certification for water and dust resistance. So if water resistance, dust resistance is important to you, it does not have an official IP rating, ingress protection rating. But most phones today are pretty much at least IP54, which means they can probably take some basic sprinkles and some rain. And that happened to me on my trip in Australia. I got caught in a little bit of a rain, and it did get wet. Now, I wasn't holding it out there in the rainstorm, so it got soaked with water, or I wasn't dunking it in the water. But it did get wet. It got splashes on it, and it survived. And that's going to be most of your phones today, even though there's no official IP rating. Most of them are like IP54. It's going to handle some basic rain and some sprays and a little bit of wetness, and you'll be fine. So unless you're dunking this thing in some water, you're going to be fine on that waterproofing area there. It'll handle some basic splashes, and that should be fine for most people, I think. So I think that's pretty much going to do it for my review of the Nokia 8. If I missed anything, you have any other questions, let me know in the comment section below. But I do think it's a very good phone, but I think I pointed out some of the negatives and gaps here in the Nokia 8. And that's just why I don't think it's worth $700-800. And I think if you can pick it up for $500 or less, especially here in the United States, I think that's a good buy. It's a very solid, sturdy phone. I really like the all-metal build. The performance on this is very fast and fluid with that stock Android and flagship specs. And of course, if you like stock Android, I think you're going to really like this phone. It's got a more than capable camera with probably the best portrait mode on the market until I test out the iPhone 8 Plus and Note 8, etc. It's got all-day battery life. It's got acceptable audio. So I think overall, as an experience, I've really enjoyed using the Nokia 8. And I think you will too if you're able to get it at a fairly reasonable cost. So like I said again, if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below. And as always, thanks for watching.